shot a hawk once. She fell through lemon leaf from her high nest in the cottonwood tree. Blanched in blinding headlamps, I laughed with my friends. Listing the laws I broke, then I left her in the road. I did not tell them my remorse and laughter, double-barreled faster than the shots scatter blasted recoils and feathers. Remorse that stays, though the image has changed. She falls differently in each memory of memory. I am yet chained to the spinning rock, heart and liver marked, eye on the circling hawk.
Take me back where I can see miles of dirt in front of me.
Welcome to Everybody Wants to Be a Farmer, a podcast about the hope, hardship, and fistfuls of grit it takes to win the land's trust. In this show, we'll share the story of our farm, J.C. Acre, and talk with others shaping the future of food and farming. Those who've stayed, those who've left, and those like us just trying to find their way. I believe that in one way or another, everybody wants to be a farmer. Okay, look at you, look at me. We're back. It's
Here
me.
we are.
I'm Josh Davis. This is Everybody Wants to Be a Farmer, and I am here with one of my closest friends, Seth Wieck. Seth is probably one of the most fascinating people that I know. And I'm sure, Seth, you would disagree with this, but Seth has done a lot of things, and one of them has been growing up farming. And I'm excited to talk to Seth. He's a poet, just one of the most brilliant people that I know, thoughtful, wonderful to have you here, Seth. Thank you for doing this with me today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. After that introduction, I expect everybody's expectations to fall off steeply about right now when I start talking. So,
we're not going to let him down. So you grew up farming,
Mhm.
and you're not a farmer anymore.
I
Now
am not.
you are a poet,
Among other
and
things,
some other
yes,
things.
yes.
Yeah, but to me, first and foremost, you are a poet and a dear friend. Just tell me about let's just talk about like Seth Wieck's childhood.
Sure. I grew up a mile north of Umbarger, Texas. And Umbarger, I mean, really, if you were to look at Umbarger, and if you grew up in Umbarger, you grew up a mile away from it somehow. You didn't grow up in Umbarger. It was kind of an unincorporated town. It had a Catholic, still has a Catholic church, a post office, a liquor store, a grain elevator, and a garage, like
Everything you need.
mechanic shop. Pretty much all the things that you needed. And so I grew up on a farm, about a half section of land, 320 acres, just about a mile north of there. And that was it was interesting too, because when I think about that place, my grandparents were just a couple of miles east of us. That was the place that my dad had grown up. And then my uncle was about 3 or 4 miles to the west of us, and another uncle 3 or 4 miles southwest of us. And by the time I came around, I was the fourth generation growing up in Umbarger. My great-grandfather was an immigrant from Germany, stepped off the train in Umbarger in 1922, I think. So you just had several generations, and I still have a couple of cousins that are still out there farming, but by and large, all of us that grew up out there have moved off have been urbanized, I guess.
Was that
yeah.
so the property that you grew up on, it wasn't like generational land? Your dad bought that, I'm assuming, at some point.
My granddad had owned it. He had bought
Okay.
it. They called it Shorty's place because Shorty was the guy that lived next door to us. And then dad purchased it from my grandfather. And when my dad, like if you talk to these multi-generational farmers, you'll see that most of them all were in business with their dad at some point or took over.
Mhm.
And, it gets complicated when you've got a bunch of kids. But Dad and one of my uncles and my granddad had a cattle company where they farmed and raised cattle together. And then that split up after a couple of years after Dad had gotten married and started and basically had enough capital to go on his own. He bought our place. And he and Mom got married when they were 19 and 18 years old, which was totally normal.
Yeah.
Because it's like they're done with school. They've grown up farming. They've had their entire apprenticeship as a life. And now they're just ready to start business and start a family. And so that's how they got there.
Man. So your dad, so that the cattle company, did your dad move some cattle over when he started his own farm? Like, what did his farm look like when he bought that place?
That's a great question.
What was he farming? Do you know?
I mean, I don't know what they had been raising. So this is the late 70s, 78, 79. Sugar beets. There was a sugar processing plant in Hereford, which is 30 miles west of us. So sugar beets were a big deal at that time. Obviously wheat. Those are the big crops that I know about. I grew up the stuff that we grew up raising mostly was after that period. So Dad stopped irrigating. So I mean, like if you know anything about the Texas Panhandle, we're less than 20 inches of rain a year on average. Some years are better, some years are much worse. So for a long time, everybody irrigated like crazy around here. And Dad told me stories when he was a kid. They just have these 8-inch pipes, 8-inch wells that are just running all day.
Nonstop.
So we have playa lakes, which are this natural landscape feature that kind of it collects rainwater. And, for eons past, this is where the bison would come. Wild animals would come to get. But it also allowed the aquifer, the natural aquifer to replenish because it would gather rainwater and then soak into the soil and eventually make its way into the aquifer. But by the time Dad was in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they were irrigating so much. Those playa lakes were still full all the time, but it was Ogallala water. But by the time I came around, Dad, and I think a lot of those guys out there were kind of shifting away from that. They were seeing that those wells were starting to have to drill deeper. It's costing more to pump it up. So they switched to more dry land stuff. There's still guys that are irrigating, but it's just not nearly as much as they were back then. So he switched to dry land versions of things, wheat, maize or milo, sorghum. We tried cotton one year, but oddly enough, it was flooded out. It was the wet year and it got flooded out. So Dad was done with that at that point. He said, I don't know if these are appropriate jokes, but if you know my dad, it sounds really like he said, the only cotton I've ever raised was in my wife's dress.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds like my dad.
That's great. So I know that your dad did some kind of, this podcast is about regenerative agriculture. And I know that your dad was kind of like not an early adopter, but kind of almost a pioneer of some more responsible farming practices.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, his brothers thought he was strange. I remember growing up and Dad, there's a couple of things. One, I think Dad just saw this isn't sustainable. And if we're going to stay here, we're going to have to try other things. And then he also, this was the early 90s, like 1990, as early as you can go. He wanted to do organic meat. And so he's trying these different things. And I remember having Wendell-Berry's A Gift of Good Land around the house. I don't think Dad's ever read anything else by Wendell-Berry. None of the literary stuff, right? It's strictly essays and best farming practices and those kinds of things. So he had switched to dry land. He had tried less of the synthetic fertilizer, more like import manure from the feedlots and stuff, just to put organic matter in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
He had also it's funny, the stories. I don't know if I'm answering your questions, but this is interesting stories that I heard growing up. Like they had sugar beets. That was a very water intensive crop for our area. And then you had pests, rabbits, that would get out there and start eating the tops off of the of the sugar beets, so they die in the ground. So they sprinkled this stuff. It's rodent poison, just powder over the entire field. And then they go out there the next day and there's just dead rabbits everywhere. Anyway, you harvest the beets then, and then you turn them into food. I'm sure
Delicious.
that was good.
It sounds amazing.
One
sounds
of the,
kind of like the reason we are regenerative farmers now.
Exactly. I think he saw enough of that stuff. One of his neighbors was using that same poison, and he had set his hat on a bag of it, and then it's sweaty hat, and then put it back on, and it soaked into his skin, and the man went blind for a few days. I think Dad just saw enough of that stuff where you're like, this probably isn't. We can't keep doing it like this.
Yeah.
Not just the water and the natural resources, but that kind of, you're just injecting poison into everything.
Yeah.
So I think he saw the end of it, and tried to do other things. The other aspect, which I know I touched on a little bit earlier, was just the organic meat, mostly poultry, because at least in Texas, if you're doing poultry under a certain number of birds per year, you can process them yourselves. So we had a slaughterhouse and processing plant. So every Saturday from the time I was 9 to 18, we butchered chickens, pretty much, or turkeys during the holiday seasons. And then we slowly added other things into that. We couldn't process our own beef because of regulations, and we sold milk. I would milk a cow in middle school, but the market for it wasn't great. Again, this was I know one of the things that you're up against, even at this point in 2025, the proliferation of local, eat your own local food is a much more widely known idea. This was in 1990, and people were still enthralled with the fact that you could just get an abundance of food for cheap, but not have any idea the kind of factory and chemical stuff that was going on behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have to market that stuff away back then.
Yeah,
nobody knew about it.
He just didn't. Yeah, he was uphill against a marketing curve that.
Yeah. Man, so you grew up like the way I want my kids to grow up. And at some point something happened and you realized or decided that farming wasn't like your future. What was that turning point?
Yeah, well, growing up on the farm, it's kind of strange, because there's a lot of things I look back on my upbringing with a lot of gratitude that happened, that I did, and honestly, if I could convince my wife to do it now, I would go back. But also well, I'll answer your question. Part of growing up, I was 10 miles outside of town, which doesn't seem that far. There's no school in Embarger, so we went to Canyon, 10 miles away. All of my friends were in Canyon. All of their parents probably worked in Amarillo. The big economy for our region is Amarillo. If you want a decent paying job, you go to Amarillo. In fact, when Dad left farming, he got a job in Amarillo. My mom, for off and on through middle school and high school, and then all the way, and then after I left the house, she was working in Amarillo. So that it kind of gives you an idea. And I think probably anybody listening, you're like, this is the way it works. so part of it was just this, for me, the social aspect of living on the farm was difficult. If I was going to do anything, it was a drive-in. And then the big moment when I was a senior in high school, like Christmas vacation, Dad and I were in the butcher house making sausage. And I was like, hey, so I think I'm 18, I'm about to graduate. I probably ought to start figuring out what's the next step. How do I get some land? How do I venture out into this? Up until that point, I had just only imagined myself as a hired hand on this place. I did whatever he told me to do. I wasn't planning any of the crops. I wasn't, other than, I was the guy on the tractor, but I wasn't trying to figure out what the markets were or any of that stuff. So Dad, he said, I don't know, Seth, I think I'm about to quit. Because he was almost 40. I think he turned 40 or 41 when I was a senior in high school. And he was, which is younger than I am now. And he was saying, I don't have any health insurance. I don't have any retirement. I don't know how I'm going to, if I got hurt, I wouldn't be able to work. And his dad had just passed away, or was about to pass away within a couple months. And he had lived a full life on the farm and had no issues, but things had changed so dramatically. He watched a lot of his brothers-in-law who were farming in different places that they kind of followed that corporate model where they got bigger and bigger, and they are all getting new tractors and stuff. Not that there was anything, I mean, I don't judge them for it. That's what was going on. If you wanted to be successful, you just leveraged more and more. You had to get bigger and bigger, more and more land. And to farm more and more land, you had to get bigger and bigger tractors, because the margins just kept getting smaller and smaller. I think he was at that moment when I was about to graduate. Like, I think I just need to go. I think I'm going to have to go get a different job. And he did. And he said, I think I would go to college if I were you, Seth. So right then I was like, well, this is the first time I've ever thought about going to college. I wish I'd have thought about this last year.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to college, which was the right step. I mean, it's funny. I can tell that story that way, but I can also tell the story of like having been out plowing, my cousins that are still farming. I'd see them later and like, was that the field you were plowing? Yeah. Man, did you fall asleep? Those rows sure are crooked. So my mind is off. I don't know what I was thinking about. Probably
Writing poems.
writing poems.
There's a huge portion of what I want this show to be that your story and your dad's story is insanely important, I think, because like it's difficult. Like it really is difficult, and it's choosing a life like this is like, oh dude, so much harder than I thought it was 5 years ago when I was like, I'm gonna go be a farmer. This is gonna be incredible. It is incredible and I love it. But it's a really difficult thing, and to me it's 100% worth it. And I think for a long time it was 100% worth it for your dad. And but like people do move on from it, and I think like there's zero shame in that. But one of the things that I really love about your story is like, yeah, you went off to college, you pursued something completely different than farming as far as a career path and even just education. But like, I didn't know very many farmers growing up. Until I became a farmer, really, I didn't know very many farmers. And a thing that I appreciate about you and your art is that everything is farming. Everything has to do with the land, and everything has to do with life and the relationship between life and land. I'd love to talk about like how your upbringing has shaped the way that you write and how even though you aren't a farmer by trade, how you are kind of still a farmer at heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I often, when I sit down at the desk to write, I'm sitting somewhere on that farm, those 340 acres, 320 acres, because that's what I knew. That was such a formative thing, just being able to see. We live in town now, and I get a little antsy. We have trees, and it's really nice to have trees. But I get a little antsy because I can't see very far. And I know it may sound weird to somebody that's not living here, but when you grow up here in the Texas Panhandle, and you can just see weather that is hours away, coming slowly. I mean, the way you see time is different because of that. And it really was. I just remember being on the tractor, and you could sit there, and as you're making your rounds, and you'd be there for 6 or 7 hours, and you just see this weather pattern building off on the horizon, and it gets closer and closer. And then inevitably would get to the corner of your property and turn and go into town and rain and on fescue grass.
Yeah, that's right. Rain on everybody's yard, everybody's
What are y'all
irrigated
growing?
lawn.
That was a real existential, often a moment that I had growing up. And it's funny because it wasn't even my risk. It wasn't like I had any risk at this other than my $7.25 an hour I was making sitting on the tractor. Just the anxiety that I knew my dad was feeling as he watched the same thing happen. That gets passed down to you. And that because it gets passed down to you, that's just the way that I see things now. That's the way that I see the weather. One is it's incredibly beautiful, but I don't know what's coming in it. I don't know that it's going to get here. And when it does show up, is it going to be full of hail? That's just kind of the thing. And again, I have had none of my livelihood as an adult tied to that, but it is something that is something that is in me. So apply that to writing. When you sit down to tell a story, that's kind of those are, I guess, and the conflict there isn't it's a cosmic conflict. I mean, who else controls the weather but God? And I can pray, but I'm not bending his will. I know that he hears me, but I'm not bending his will. He's going to do what he does, and I'm going to watch it happen. Which I think is probably a good role for a writer, is to just sit I'm watching this happen, and I'm gonna take a record of it. It's almost passive. You're sitting on the outside of it. Probably not a good role for a farmer to sit, because you can't be passive. You've got to get up, and you have to go. You've got to plow. You've got to put the seed in the ground. You have to, in the hopes that the early rains and the late rains will show up when they're supposed to, or when they usually do. I mean, there's a passage in, I think it's James, the hope of the farmer for the early and late rains, the patience of the farmer. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
It's also such an overwhelming experience, that kind of thing, living it like that I can't, there's not a way to think about it unless I put it down in some sort of form. I guess that's probably why I end up doing it as a poem or something, to think about it in a way that doesn't just make my mind explode. I can put it down into a story or into verse, something like that.
Well, I think that, I'm not a writer. I have written before. I can write my name and stuff, but I'm not a writer. And when the rain skips our spot, and you can see it raining on the other side of the draw to the west of our house, but not at our house, I don't write it down. I just yell about it. gripe to my wife about it. And so yet a lot of your writing has actually helped me kind of process a lot of this stuff. And there are a few poets that are that way for me that actually you've shown me, but our listeners don't know this, but Seth actually wrote our listeners. I don't know how many we've got at this point, but Seth wrote it's an epic poem, right? Ulysses Horizon Emerald. Is that what it's
Sure.
called?
It is Ulysses
it's
Horizon
long.
Emerald. Yeah, it is long. I don't know that it's technically epic, but for our purposes, it's a long.
Yeah, it's epic to me. But there's a line in that poem, and it's not even really about what the poem is really about, but it's what it's about to me. There's a line in it where one of the characters is describing to the other character kind of why he farmed and how he started farming. The whole poem's about our area, and there's a quote from it that has become the mission statement for our farm. Would you read that?
But wild hope springs from tended strength. I shook with purpose, not with foreclosure. Plot by plot, I won the land's trust. Now she's rich and full of the renewing green.
God, man, it gets me every time. I mean, it's seriously every time it gets me. That's our whole goal in this thing. And I don't think, I've said this in a previous episode, but I don't think I'll see it rich and full of the renewing green in my lifetime. And that's one of the things that I love about agriculture in general. You really don't see this in a lot of business models, but agriculture, and specifically regenerative agriculture, is such a generational pursuit. And our hope with JC Acre is that one day our community will see this rich and full of the renewing green, and one day my kids, whether they're farmers or not, will see the work that we've done producing something that regenerates and continues to grow and thrive and feed. So that quote has been massive for our operation, and I'm grateful for it. But that's just that's a drop in the bucket of your writing. You have a book coming out like within a couple of months, I believe, of this recording. The title of the book, Seth, is
Call Out Coyote.
Call Out Coyote. It is not Call Out Coyote. And the reason is because we are from the panhandle of Texas. You can call it Call Out Coyote, I'm sure. I'm sure people can call it.
You can. That's when I grew up, that's the way the animal was introduced to me. But I also grew up watching Looney Tunes, and it was Wile E. Coyote. So
yeah.
I knew that there was multiple pronunciations of it.
Yeah. I've never called him Wile E. Coyote in my life.
No, that's not his name.
It sounds
Coyote.
stupid. That's right.
I think that's one of the great things about the word and the animal itself is that you just can't pin it down. The thing is resilient in all kinds of ways, and it will survive, whether it's a coyote or a coyote. It really doesn't care what we call it, probably.
That's right. That's right. That's the beautiful thing. Why, where did the title come from?
I have a poem called "The Names of Crops," and it's essentially it's a collection of these images of my dad pointing out crops. And as a kid, you're introduced to these things, and he can just point to it and say, "This is Milo," and it has a name. How do you know what its name is? And he could just point out to everything, and that's what this is called, and that's what this is called, which is, it's the first function of mankind as Adam to name things. But it's that function of the father too, to parents in general, to teach their kids the names of the things in the world around them. And which then once you have a name for it, then you start to see it and you start to pay attention to it and you start to call it. And the thing about a coyote is that it's kind of always wandering on the borders of things. Those kind of places that we inhabit, but don't. It's still such a mystery that this wild animal just kind of walks across your place. So to see it and then call it out when it happens.
That's awesome. And that I didn't say this, but Call It Coyote is a collection of poems. It's not a novel. It's a collection of poems. Um,
It is, and it will include Ulysses Arrives in Amarillo. So,
oh, I did not know that it was in there.
yeah, so it will. Yeah,
Oh.
if people get it, they'll be able to read the poem that you like so much.
Incredible. That's incredible. So it's got that. It has the poem that we played at the beginning of this episode called Vision. That clip is the voice of our friend Ryan Colwell. He's also the writer and performer of our intro and outro music, Flatlands. Hopefully one day he'll be on this show. Ryan's actually, Seth, I think you know this. Ryan's the reason that we started our farm. Did you know that? We'll tell that story another time. Do you have a poem that you'd be willing to read from? Are you allowed to?
Yeah. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, that's right. It's my
Let me,
poems.
Let me find. Sorry, I don't have it. I don't have a paper copy
that's okay.
yet. It's like
I didn't
so
warn
I'm gonna
you
be
that we
reading
were
off
going to do
of
this.
you. I'm just in that mode of like I really want to have it in my hands. Right?
Yeah, I'm in that mode too. You're gonna read it, okay, and then you're gonna help me know what you're talking about. It takes me about 53 times of reading a poem to feel like I have an understanding of what's being said a lot of times.
Yeah. It
That's the
depends
beauty
on the
of poetry.
poem. Yeah, let's just do names of crops. Let's just do
Oh,
names
yes.
of crops. Sorry.
Yeah, I like it. I think I've heard this one before and I love it.
Here's the poem, Names of Crops. At a mile, measured along the muzzle plane of my father's arm, iron-sighted between forefinger and thumb, a dog speck loped across the nail of his index, fully formed, flea-sprung. He called it forth. Coyote. Coyote. The man had a hawk's vision. So far away the feral form floated in the fence line. I mimicked his naming of nearly nothing. Dropping his hand, he named grain heads as red as the sun-red arm which assayed their weight by the acre. Twin, tea, sin, tree, weight, maize. 20th-century weight maize, Milo, sorghum, each a name for the same thing for which I had no name. He shucked a maize head, opened his hand, bleeding spores of red kernels, rolling in palm creases like a crackerjack ball in a maze. Roll the ball from beginning to end. In the maze's beginning, our tractor and drill sowed mouses and bunnies from the clods. Hawks, canceleered, censored the scenes behind a flash of pinion and wing. Cottontails, hares, vermin, and vole disseminated from the viscera. Count 3 days, index, middle, ring. Then finger comb the dirt kernel tunes. Verily, he said, in seed red letters, tipped at his soiled index, a maize seed split by a tendril tail like altricial kits spilt from a doe rabbit harrowed by the plow. Naming the crop split me, a thumb from a forefinger, a row from a row, and line upon line I call out coyote.
There's a lot. There's a lot in there that, I mean, even us talking about the difference between coyote and coyote, like maize, Milo, sorghum. It's like this is all the same thing. It's all kind of it's a mystery to this little boy who's watching his dad call it out.
Yeah, I mean that's, I guess, I mean I don't look at poetry and farming as too much different things in this way. So much of farming is this generational thing, and you're experiencing this as a first generation farmer, Josh, where you're raising your kids there and you're teaching them all of these things, and you're teaching them also as you're learning how to do it, right? Like the mistakes you made, or like, this is the it worked. It worked. This is great. The chickens are producing eggs, and the land this year looks better than it did last year. Whatever incremental things that you're seeing that nobody else is ever going to see. But then your boys and your daughters are going to be, they're growing up on that place, and they're right now, I mean, think about it. They're 2 feet off the surface of the land right now because they're that's just where they're at. They're crawling in it. And you're teaching them how to do this. Language is the same way. We're taught by our parents, obviously, and there's not some sort of rigorous curriculum that is teaching us how to speak, just to learn to talk. It's just that we're communicating, and I think it's really special to grow up on a farm, because there are things that you're able to see. The horizon of knowledge is much broader, I guess, than maybe if you're kind of set in a suburban thing where all the houses look the same and all the lot sizes are square, and we come home, we commute to work, and we come home and sit in our house and watch TV. So our world, maybe we get some knowledge from the outside world through the screens, whatever, but it's not real. There's nothing staked to it, I guess. Like I can watch an hour of reels on Instagram, and that knowledge is fascinating and keeps my interest going, but it has no bearing on my life. But when you're living on that farm and you're growing up there, and the words that are being told to you what they are, suddenly the stuff has much higher stakes. And I think it's important. I think those things are very much tied together. So much of our language is built out of agricultural terminology anyway, metaphors and things we think, or how we think is tied to that stuff.
Man. Yeah. And there's a huge difference in one of the reasons that we wanted to raise our kids this way. And that the way that we raise our kids is one of the main reasons that we chose to do this anyway. But I grew up, and my dad was a wonderful dad, really great dad. But I grew up like him going to work. I had nothing to. I knew that he went and built houses, but I didn't know what that meant. And like he would leave in the morning, he would go, build a whole house that day in my mind, and then come back home, and then this new house existed, and I had no idea. And I think there's something really, really special and important about my kids. Like, it's super annoying. They're knocking on this door right now. He just opened it. He's hey, can you close the door? I'm doing this. I need
My dad's a podcaster.
Dude, you want to show Seth?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Lost a tooth today.
Congratulations.
I put it on myself.
You did it yourself? Good job, dude. Seth said congratulations. You can't hear him because of my headphones.
I can hear him a little bit.
You can?
Mhm.
Okay, hop out because it was bound to happen. I'm glad it happened with you. I need one of those lights that I could flip on to show my family that the studio's in use. That's a perfect example, and I might blur face, but that's a perfect example of like, I want my kids to see me at work. Like, I kind of want my kids to be like, bring your son to work day every single day. And that's that's what's cool about the way you grew up. And I think that's why you are able to write in the way that you can write, is because you experienced, from my perspective, a childhood that was kind of processed through your dad's eyes, right? So like that poem of you describing the red sunburnt arm that matched the color of the Milo that he was pointing out, telling you about. And maybe you even talked about how it matched the sun setting and the horizon. I don't know. Like that's what my kids get to grow up with. And my childhood was wonderful. I have no complaints. I have a few complaints, but not many. I wasn't with my dad every day. And there's a special thing that is super shaping, I hope, for my kids being included in my work and the thing that like I lose sleep over. And I think it whether they become farmers or not, like I hope that that's part of the renewing green, you know. I hope that that's the part of the tended strength that springs wild hope, is that one day, whatever experiences that Celia and I are providing to our family will shape everything about what they do in the future. Whether it's, appraising homes or writing songs or poems or, I don't know, loaning people money from a bank. Uh, I think there is a special thing about growing up on a farm, and that's one of our biggest hopes in this thing.
I agree. I think those are all very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
This episode of Everybody Wants to Be a Farmer is sponsored 100% by J.C. Acre, offering prairie-raised eggs and pork to our friends in the Amarillo and Canyon area of the Texas Panhandle. You can find us online at jcacre.co or follow us on Instagram at jc_acre. Back to you, Josh.
They started a farm and they got some chickens and eggs.
You're obviously a Windleberry fan. I don't know anybody who has had anything to do with farming or writing that isn't inspired by Windleberry. And one of the things that we all like to talk about most when we talk about Windleberry is having a sense of place and the importance of that. And we've kind of touched on that in this conversation already, kind of your sense of place. But there, Umbarger's not awesome. Like it's cool. Farming communities are cool, but like it's not an attractive thing to most people. And it's very clear in the way that you write and the way that you talk and the way that you like live your life that like your place, that Spanky's place or whatever, what was it called? Was it Spanky's place? Shorty's place?
Shorty's place.
That Shorty's place, like it's kind of like the fulcrum of everything that you do and think. How does Umbarger turn into that? Like how does a place like Umbarger become the filter that your entire inner monologue passes through before it exits in the form of writing or speaking?
I don't know. I mean, that is a question for the ages.
Yeah.
I maybe it helps to give you some statistics about Umbarger. Umbarger maybe has 150 people at this point, and even growing up, it was about that. I mean, Umbarger proper, if you looked at the physical limits of the town. I mean, I maybe there's two parts to this question. Let's talk about Umbarger, and like the aspects of that place that make it a kind of a unique place in our current age. And then how does that wind up in writing? Part of Umbarger's, I mean, it was founded as a railroad stop after the Civil War, land grants were given to railroads to kind of start to populate the rest of the nation so you could get the resources that were available in the nation to major metropolises, metropoli. And part of that came through the Panhandle after the Comanche were pushed out. And the Umbarger was founded by a veteran of the Civil War, a man named Umbarger, and all it was just a post. It was a stop that they could drop things off. There was no town. About 15 years later, a Catholic priest from Germany, Reisdorf, came through, and he was basically planting parishes, Catholic parishes. He planted one called Nazareth, and then Umbarger, he wanted to call Bethlehem, which would make sense. But the post office was already called Umbarger, so there was no fighting that. But he put a church there called St. Mary's, or a parish. And a parish is like the community around that comes to this church. And they were all basically German immigrants. And so you had an entire community that was built around this kind of communal function. So everybody had their own farms, but, to get coal delivered, everybody kind of put together, a deposit and paid the coal company, which then dropped off a load of coal at the railroad stop. And everybody came with their wagons and got that and took it home. Or any sort of thing like that. Lumber, because there were no trees here to build houses, so the lumber had to be imported. So you have this community that's built that way, which makes it pretty unique. And then you do that for 2 or 3 generations, and everybody, there's a limit to that, because at some point you've got to start going outside to find wives, because now everybody's cousins.
Yeah.
And which is probably, that's probably one of the reasons that I left. There was nobody to marry in Umbarger.
Unless it was your cousin.
Unless it was my cousin. But so you think about doing that for a few generations, and what that like all of the community is constantly gathering around to do these things, and farming, like harvest would happen, and people would help harvest, to get it in on time. There's a time frame to harvest a crop before it is too late. It is now shook off in the ground, or a storm came in and wiped it out, whatever. You got to get it in. So if somebody's struggling to get the crop in, as soon as you can get yours done, you're helping somebody else. It's very much a communal. Plus, you throw that into the kind of the religious feasts and festivals and all of those things, as opposed to what a kind of a community looks like now. They're building one just east of Umbarger, between Canyon and Umbarger. It's not a town. They're calling it a municipal utility development.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's not an incorporated city. It's basically, they needed to put in a development with a bunch of houses, but to, get past a certain density, you have to have a public utility system, water, sewage, electricity, all that stuff. And it is required to have that. Well, you can't do that unless you've got an incorporation, or unless you can pass some sort of thing. Anyway, they basically wrangled the county into paying for it. But there's not. It's going to have eventually. It's going to have enough housing for 14,000 people. There are not enough jobs in Canyon for those people to live there, right? So these people are all going to be, every day, get up in the morning at 8:00, drive to Amarillo, go to work, come home. And the only time they're in their house is to sleep, right? And they'll probably pick up food on the way home. They're there, they watch TV, entertain themselves, they go to bed. And that is their entire communal life, is for them to all get on the same highway and to drive to work 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away eventually, when all this traffic starts hitting, right? Now it's an hour away. And then they turn around and come home, and their entire communal life is that. And then they are angry that some so-and-so is not keeping his grass green or whatever. As opposed to Umbarger growing up, right? And I'm sure there were people that were mad that somebody wasn't plowing their crops or whatever. That's just a normal function of life, but it's a different way. There's no community built into this mud. So that's, if you think about those two different kinds of community in this context, now, how does that come out in writing is a sense of place, to get around to the actual question. If you look at writing throughout history, whether it's Greek mythology, Ulysses, or at least the Greek version, Odysseus, he has his own epic poem, the Odyssey, which they're making a movie out of right now. So I'm sure everybody can, if they're not familiar with it, if they weren't taught it in high school, they can at least go watch the movie next year.
I'll do that.
but the entire thing, he's been gone from home for 20 years. He left his son as a baby to go to war in Troy. And that war lasted 10 years. And then it took him 10 years of shipwrecks to get home after that. So it's been 20 years. By the time he gets home, the son's a full grown man. And the whole thing, I mean, there's just so many moments in that poem where he's just weeping for Ithaca, his home. And he can't, he's just trying to get back to it. So that's one of the earliest poems that we have, right? It's not the earliest, but it's definitely one of the earliest. It's this sense of, it's this sense of home, place, right? And there's lots of ways to read that. Cause he gets home and immediately leaves again. But there's, to be a writer before it's, universalizing it for an audience, for people that would read it, to be a writer, you kind of have to, you're spending so much time in your own memory and trying to make sense of not just your own upbringing, but the world around you. And then as I grew up, I saw that Umbarga was a unique place. Even in the, I would go to town and all my friends were watching MTV and and then I would go home and butcher chickens. And it's like I inhabited two different, not just worlds, but times.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same urge that I think that you're feeling now, where there's something broken and cracked with the world. And I don't like this. How do you still have to participate in it, to some degree. You still have to raise your kids in it to some degree. But there's also there are other ways, and it's not nostalgia the nostalgia has worn off for you. Like, it was so great back then when we could do these things, and you're realizing, oh, it's hard as hell. But I think, maybe that communal aspect, even if it doesn't mean everybody's getting along and it's peaceful and hunky-dory, because we're all just hunky-dory is a phrase my Grady would use. Because we're humans and it's never been peaceful, obviously. But there are certain ways to live, I think, that are better for us. And I think that's maybe one aspect. Even that quote that you use from my poem is a little bit of looking at, I wrote most of that in 2020. And just seeing how broken the world was in 2020. And then going out on the land. I lived on 5 acres at that point, and everything was just dry. And you have to hope. And so you begin to imagine what it looks like if this thing turns green. And then when you begin to imagine what it looks like when it turns green, you're like, well, how do I get there? And part of it is I could add, ammonium nitrate.
Ammonium nitrate, yeah.
I could add water. But then that goes away pretty quick. So how do I do this long term? And then you start thinking, well, I can do this. I can do a little bit, and then I can teach my kids to do it, and they can do a little bit. And we didn't arrive here, in one generation. It's, like I said, my grandfather's generation irrigated this place dry. And they were doing the best they could. I mean, this is amazing. We have unending water. We'll just keep, and we can grow whatever, like they could in Ohio or something, or Iowa. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It answers it really well. I think, there's a funny, and I it might be this way. I've been in Amarillo my whole life, or in this area my whole life. And there's this thing, it might be this way a lot of other places. Like maybe you grew up in, I don't know, who cares? I grew up in Amarillo, and for a long time in my late teens and early 20s, like all I could imagine was getting out of here,
Mhm.
going somewhere better, and like living this life that I had fabricated in my head.
Mhm.
And I tried it a few times, and there was always something that kept, it just wasn't home. And it just wasn't like, it wasn't home. And it was cool, and there was a lot of cooler stuff than where I grew up, and it looked prettier. There were trees, but it wasn't home. And something kept, you know, I'm here and I love it now. Um, and you know, I've kind of had to redefine like beauty. The Panhandle's a tricky spot. Like it's not like it's not the hot chick. Uh, like it's beautiful. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth, in my opinion. And like you kind of have to redefine beauty for yourself, I think. But and you might not even have an answer for this. You probably have an opinion. I think I do, but I haven't formed it yet. Uh like you formed this sense of place with the
Mhm.
Umbarger, Texas. And one of the most unbecoming places on the surface, like from the outside looking in. Like,
Sure.
how do you love that place? Um, and there are plenty of people who have left this area. We know a bunch of them,
Mhm.
and have zero plans to return, and maybe don't even miss it very much. They have changed their place that they have developed a sense of place for.
Yep.
And I think that's possible. And that's the thing that I wrestle with a lot when I think about the sense of place is like, well, why, like, if this place means so much to me, like, why doesn't it mean so much to somebody else? Like, why can't more people see the beauty of this place? And yeah, I mean, if you have a thought on that, I have a thought on it, but
Well, I'd be interested to hear your thought. I have part of it is, you're right. It's not immediately apparent that this place is beautiful. I mean, if your only perspective of it is driving through at 75 miles an hour, um, because you can't see that. Um, Not to mention along any interstate in America, you just get the ugly industrial view of any town. Um, but I I think because um, you grow up in a place and you see it in all the different lights and all the different weather. And there's plenty of ugly of it. Every February and early March here, I'm looking at other places to live because the dirt turns loose and it blows 70 miles an hour. But gosh, as soon as that stops and the green comes out and those first spring nights get a little humid and it makes you linger past dark, listening to the birds and stuff that have come out, that have come or have returned, or those summer days when it's super hot and you can feel the weather changing and you see the storms coming in, or the fall. It just ended, but like even being here in town, like our neighbors have these locust trees that are huge and they turn golden, and like you see it, and it's like they're lanterns, during certain parts of the day, and you see that kind of light. And you only see it because you were here year after year after year, and you saw it in the different seasons. Um, and it takes your entire childhood to form
Mm.
that understanding of what is beautiful. Now, is it a Rocky Mountain? No. That's plainly beautiful. Everybody can see that. It takes zero commitment to see that it's beautiful. Um, and I think that, yeah, you feel the weather in different ways. It is, there's your beauty. Did that answer your question? I don't know.
yeah, that did. And It did very much. And I think my thought on it is that maybe people's inability to capture their sense of place the way that you did, the way that I'm hoping to continue to do for myself, is that they need someone to tell them that it's beautiful and show them how beautiful it is and what beauty is. And I think that's the role of a farmer, a regenerative farmer,
Yeah.
is like, hey, there's life down there
Mm.
that doesn't need to be suffocated out. And if we won't suffocate the life out by pursuing efficiency, then there's beauty down there, and you just can't see it. And you're looking at the beauty that you see on top when you do all of these things that you feel like you should do. But there's beauty down there, and there's life under there.
Mm.
And and I think that's the role of writers and poets and artists as well, is like, hey, you didn't recognize how beautiful a coyote is. It just looks like a pest to you.
Mm-hmm.
But look at it through this lens and see that not only is the Milo beautiful on the sunset, and not only is these perfect rows of crops like attractive to the eye, but this thing that can come in and destroy it all, or this thing that can come in and wipe out your whole flock of hens or whatever. There's beauty in all of this stuff. And I think like that's one thing for me is like Umbarger at this point in my life is freaking awesome because of what you have painted it as for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think like there are people who have a job to do, and a lot of us don't know that something's beautiful until it is like shown to us. You don't know the name of that crop until your dad stretches his arm out and tells you what it is. And you got to
exactly
call it
right.
out.
Yeah.
And we just wrapped this episode up because you can order Seth's book, Call Out Coyote, at, what is the link, Seth?
Well, it's
We'll include it in the
show
description
notes.
of this episode.
Yep.
But it's coming out in February. Is that right?
Yes, sir. February of 26.
I'm excited about it. If you
can order it now though at wisebloodbooks.com. So
yeah, you can pre-order it. I have my copy pre-ordered. I pre-ordered it. I might have been the second person. I'm not sure, but I got on it early. You can pre-order it. If you are in love with this region, buy the book. If you don't love this region and you're like, well, maybe I should love this region, buy the book. Seth will teach you how to love it. It's beautiful.
And hopefully,
then come visit my farm.
Yeah, hopefully it'll teach you how to love your own region.
Yeah, that's yeah.
But yes, and come visit Josh's farm.
Come visit my farm.
It is a beautiful place.
Man, Seth, thank you.
Yeah,
it was great talking about all this stuff. I'm really like I'm super looking forward to your book. Doesn't quite capture how excited I am about it. There are a few things. We have friends who release things, and yours is equally special, and I'm like jacked up about it. So I can't wait to have my copy signed.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah,
I'll probably talk to you on Sunday.
Yeah, I'll see you.
Nobody will hear that conversation though, but it's I'm so glad you're doing this, Josh, and I'm so glad you're farming and your kids are on the farm with you. It's special. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you. I'm glad too. Glad to have you as a person to teach me how to do some of it. All right, man.
All right, bye-bye.
See you later.
Take me back where I can see miles of dirt in front of me. Summer's hot and winter's mean. There ain't nothing in between.
Hey, thanks for listening today. If you liked it, or if you think you might like it in the future, please click the subscribe button, click the like button, share it with your friends, share it with your mom. we'd love to have you along for the journey. We'll have a lot of guests in the future. We'll have a lot of fun stories to tell, and we look forward to you being along for the ride. Our intro and outro music is Flatlands by Ryan Colwell. If you haven't heard of him, now you have. Go check him out. We'll see you next time.
It's a great big sky.